They're only supposed to take their masks off while they're eating or drinking, but you can see quite a large crowd, certainly not all in one single family or one single household that are mixing. You can see on the streets of Ybor City this massive crowd, again, not many of them wearing a mask. I spoke to the Tampa police and I asked them, what are you doing about this?
Of course, neither that event nor any of the big sports celebrations like the one in Alabama after they won the national championship became super spreaders. Contrary to the predictions from the Debbie Downers who tried to convince us to end most contact sports in America. Okay, they didn't want us to have any fun, and they hate the fact that people are out in the streets having fun. But nothing happened. I've spent much of the past year, I cannot believe it's been going on this long, trying to sound the alarm that it's liberty versus lockdown. Because there's always going to be an excuse for rich and powerful people to take away the freedom of those they don't even like that much less respect. The people of California finally are beginning to fight back through their effort to recall gruesome Newsom. And New York Democrats are finally turning against Andrew Cuomo. But did you notice they waited to do all of this until after the inauguration? So the question is, when will the people begin to do the same with Biden and Fauci? Let's face it, we can't continue drifting along month after month with no clear direction as to when or if most Americans will ever be able to live something that looks like a normal life. After almost a year, it's clear that Dr. Fauci will never be comfortable saying that we can move forward. He'll always have another reason for fear, another excuse for delay, and he can always find another reason to keep you at home. I get it, he's a bureaucrat. They don't ever want to be blamed when things go wrong. But if we're going to escape this endless nightmare, we must have a more balanced and realistic assessment of what our situation is right now. And Dr. Fauci cannot provide us that. It's time to say no to the pseudoscience masquerading as seriousness. It's really just garden variety left-wing political punditry when you look at it. Liars in lab coats are still liars. And that's the angle. Joining me now is Dr. Scott Atlas, former White House COVID advisor and Hoover Institution senior fellow. Dr. Atlas, how is it that there hasn't been any semblance of accountability for the shifting goalposts and the faulty predictions that have been made one after the other on just things like the super spreader events that we were warned about, from everything from Mount Rushmore to Alabama to the Tampa Super Bowl celebrations?
Yeah, hey, Laura. Well, there's not only no accountability, there's a repetition of stuff as if it were never proven wrong. I mean, we're seeing it with the schools. We see it with all these super spreader, things that you just said. We're hearing just waffling on things because I think you're right. People have a lot of pressure, and that's understandable. They don't want to be wrong, except they're instilling fear. When you look at the American media in particular, and part of it is these interviews where people keep stressing what we don't know, what might happen. And we know so much, like you pointed out, about the variants. There's no evidence that there's some kind of massive spike due to these variants. There's no evidence that there's increased lethality. But we have American stories. If you look at the data from the National Bureau of Economic Research, over 90% of American stories negative and therefore fear-invoking, whereas in Europe, just over 50%. That has an impact, and at this point, when you have people that keep repeating that kind of stuff, misinformation, totally ignoring the science on the masks, actually, completely ignoring, and therefore pushing false information, they're instilling fear, and that's what's worrisome here. Because when you look at the data on the surveys, over 70% of Americans say they will wear a mask after the pandemic is over. That's very frightening. We have a damaged American psyche, and it's due to these public health officials that are just really not saying the real data, probably because they don't want to admit that they were so wrong.
Well, Scott, when you look at just things like the impediments to school opening, well, I feel like I told my producers, I don't want to do school openings. We've done this segment. We've been doing this segment since last April, okay? When people were telling me, okay, they're never going back to school. I think they have to go back to school. But this is what Fauci said about reopening schools. This was just yesterday on CNN.
Given the science, are schools being too cautious, do you think? And are there schools closed right now that should be open in person?
You know, I mean, obviously, if it's a very difficult situation to get an absolute definitive answer.
Dr. Atlas, he was just calling for the schools to be open a few weeks ago. And now as the numbers have gone down, he's saying I can't say for sure. This is supposed to be science, okay? I'm sick of this. I think this is a disservice to our kids and our teachers and the entire country. This is pathetic at this point. I'm actually really, really mad about what's happened to the kids.
And every parent should be mad. This is a heinous, really heinous abuse of public policy just for people who either don't want to be wrong or don't want to admit they're wrong or don't want to make a claim. There's one very simple policy for the schools, and it's 3 words: open the schools, period.
But it looks like, Dr. Atlas, if you live in a Democrat-run state, it doesn't look like the state's going to open this year. It looks like they're setting up this entire year to be another lost year for the kids. That's what I'm seeing, and it doesn't look like they're opening anytime soon. Your thoughts on that real quick?
Well, I think you're right. And I think in the end, the schools are supposed to be run by the parents and the school boards. And so I think, you know, at some point, you have to realize who's in charge and you have to make your voice heard. And, you know, the data has been showing us over and over again. It is proven, even, you know, the regular magazines are acknowledging this has been known nearly since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes, we said it in the beginning.
Children have such low risk. You know, you and a lot of people did. And, you know, they just keep getting away with not doing this. I just don't understand it. This is really like, this is Kafka, this is Alice in Wonderland, this is 1984, all rolled into one.
Hideous. Dr. Atlas, thank you so much. So